Hey, this is Tiqqle, and in this video we're doing another Warcraft logs review of my buddy. He did have kind of a tough parse. He was doing heroic hungering, and his name's Old School Bus. Now, he is bottom of the DPS meter. He hits a 9 parse. Not looking too great. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to dive into it and see what he could do better. He was telling me how he's gone from Enhance, and he switched over. He decided he wants to play some Elemental. So, we're going to look at a few things. This is going to highlight a few tough things that we're going to have to swallow and manage. Number one, covenants and the difference between DPS of them. Let's go ahead and take a look into my buddy. This is my buddy. Let's go ahead and look at his character first. We'll get an understanding of what he's running in this boss fight, and then we'll go from there. And then we'll do, using the comparing logs option, we'll compare him to the top DPS around his same item level. So if we look at his gear, we can see, okay, you know, we got gear from 184 to 216. He's got the 235 wind speakers. That is probably the legendary that everyone's running, for the most part, as Ellie, especially in the raid right now. Looks like he's got some decent trinkets. You know, he's got the enchants. He's got gem sockets. Not bad. But we can quickly see something that is going to be very interesting to all of you. And I want to know, what do you think about this? Put it down in the comments below. He's running Venthyr. There it is. We're going to see how it stacks up compared to the others, but he's also at a low parse, but, you know, we can see his stats overall. We're going to go ahead and compare that to the top parse. Now, again, the way you do this is you would select on the log, you'd go to the top right, compare, then down here, this will allow you this bottom option. You select the person you want to compare. It will look for a fight length that is similar, raid size that's similar, item level that's similar, time range that's similar. These are all factors that can really impact when you're comparing logs, and I recommend that you use this tool when comparing your DPS to others. There'll be very straightforward things that we will see through this log comparison, and it also has to do with the boss fight. So I'm going to be referencing parts of the boss fight by showing you video clips from when I do it on Mythic. It might be a little bit different on Heroic, but the key here is there's certain times in all boss fights, in all raid encounters, where you want to maximize your DPS in certain points, and other points where you might want to wait a few seconds before you use cooldowns. There's also certain ways to keep your uptime up, especially as an Elemental Shaman. You have Spiritwalker's Grace. This allows you to keep casting on the move. So if you get a certain mechanic, you have to run out, you have to move, you can keep your DPS uptime up. We'll look at that very soon. So what I did is I went ahead and I looked at this match percentage over here. Now, you can see in some cases the match percentage is much higher than others. That has to do with the talent selection. My friend, he went Primal Elementalist. So we're going to look at a Primal Elementalist log. There's other things that are factored in here too, but the reality is this. He's Venthyr versus Venthyr versus a usual Necrolord, which is tough. Making a switch between specs can be challenging, especially if your class doesn't use this, or your specialization doesn't use the same covenant as maybe your other DPS specialization, which is definitely the case for Elemental Shaman and Enhance. So, you know, if you want to see other logs, reviews, look down below. You guys have been sending them in. I want to thank you so much for shooting those over. You're definitely helping out people. People have given great feedback on this. So keep on, send me your logs in Discord for Enhance, Ellie, and try sending me a Boomkin or some other spec, and maybe I can find some things through analyzing the logs that might be able to help you out. And if you have specific boss fights, we do that too. So let's go ahead and move into the next one. And if there's any other tips you have, put it down in the comments. Let's go ahead and go in. Okay, this is it. We're comparing against Zap Slap, and you can see here Zap Slap is the third log here. He's got a 50% match rate. He's using the same talents, and he's did about 4.8k compared to my buddy who did a lot less, which was at pretty low at 2.3. Now, obviously, it's a pretty low log, but we're going to dig into it. Okay, number one, let's go ahead and compare these two people. Let's first of all look at the chart, as we do in many of the videos. We say, okay, well, let's take a step back. Let's look at what happened. Now, the number one thing you're going to notice between these lines, remember, the purple is the kind of the high parse versus my friend, which is blue. Now, what you're going to be able to see is the blue line basically hits 0 at certain points, and he did not die. So that is not the case. Neither of them died. So the reason it hits 0 is there's probably a mechanic that is not letting you DPS around the 2 to 3 minute mark. Maybe this is when they're running out. Maybe this is when you know, certain mechanics happening that usually you'd think maybe, okay, I can't DPS as much, but the high parse is indeed able to keep his DPS steady through this period of time. This is going to help him in a huge way for making sure you maximize DPS. So you can see the purple line never hits 0. It's key. You can see it never dips below. You can see the blue line is overall lower, but it dips way, way, way lower. So that's that. Now, another thing let's look at is the spell casts. Now you can see Lava Burst. Lava Burst from my buddy, Old School Bus, hit 42 times, okay? Well, Zap Slap over here, he hit 86 times. That is more than twice the number of Lava Bursts. Lava Burst is the #1 damaging ability for most Elemental Shaman right now. That's partially because of your legendary, the Wind Speaker. When you Earth Shock, you get an instant cast Lava Burst at plus 20% damage. The other factor here is maximizing Lava Burst will make sure that you get as many procs of Master of the Elements, which is a talent where it buffs up your next Nature Frost physical damage spell. So that's huge because weaving that buff after you cast your #1 damaging ability, weaving the Master of the Elements into Lightning Bolts or into Earth Shocks, huge way to increase your damage by 20%. So what we can see here is clearly the Zap Slap is doing more actions per minute. You can see his Lightning Bolts, again, 74 compared to my buddies at 38. That's about half. Again, that basically means a few things. #1, Zap Slap is able to keep the uptime. He's able to keep his damage rolling nonstop. He's also utilizing his legendary. He's also utilizing Primordial Wave, which is the Covenant ability for Necrolord, which allows you to get an extra Lava Burst off when you cast an extra Lava Burst when you after you cast it. Your next Lava Burst is repeated against anything with a Flame Shock. So that's big. Now let's look at Earth Shocks. Earth Shocks similarly double. Again, you get more Earth Shocks by generating more Maelstrom, by casting all the time and keeping that uptime fluid. So that's pretty much what we're seeing here. Now, frankly, you can see casts of Flame Shock exactly the same. Yeah, it kind of makes sense. The uptime is going to be pretty much the same because across the whole fight. So let's go ahead and go one step deeper. Let's look at their stats. This is something I think is interesting because they are indeed different covenants. Old School Bus, Venthyr, Zap Slap is Necrolord, the best for Elemental Shaman. You can see their stats though. Int for Old School Bus looks like 100-ish lower, but I was told, and thank you chat and Dakari, this int is snapshotted at the beginning of the fight. So if they pre-potted, this will be inflated. So these aren't great numbers to compare, especially because they're close item level. But we can see crit. Old School Bus actually has more crit. Haste, they're about the same, 40 more on Zap Slap. Mastery, a bit more on Zap Slap. Again, that'll get those overloads rolling a little bit more. Versatility, more on Old School Bus. So roughly, their stats are relatively similar, which is good to know. Their talents, exactly the same. Soul Binds are obviously different because they are different covenants. Now, everything else, stats-wise, you can see everything else here. My buddy actually has more sockets, adding more stats. But that's it. That's all we can, we should look at this page. Let's go into the meat of this, which is the casts. Now, how you do this, go to casts, go to timeline. This will show you what the DPS abilities that were pressed at the beginning of the fight. And it's very interesting because these logs are actually pretty similar at the beginning. Now, what you see is that at the beginning, and we've talked about this before, the opener, this is critical. This is the part where you spike your damage as high as possible, and that peak will carry your overall DPS a lot. For most classes, this is the case, especially on the fight like this, where you're popping Bloodlust at the beginning. It's just a repetitive, iterative fight. You know what's going to be happening. It's all time locked, all that stuff. So at the beginning here, what we see them both do is you can tell that they both pre-cast Stormkeeper. That saves them about a 1 second cast because at the beginning of the fight, they don't want to start doing that when combat starts. They want to start when they want to start before combat to make sure it's already that 1 second cast is done, so they're ready to cast it. You can see that they both pre-casted Elemental Blast to open the pull. This means when the countdown of the pull timer was 5, 4, 3, 2, they started casting by 1, and then they pulled. At the same time the pull timer goes to 0 is when their Elemental Blast should be hitting the target. That will optimize their ramp up time. Next, you can see a Flame Shot coming out of the top of my buddy, Old School Bus. Zap Slap, probably, I guess he didn't, he didn't fire Flame Shock yet, or he did like on pull or what have you, but I don't think so. I think it was probably with Primordial Wave here. Primordial Wave is a great way. This tip number, one of the tips is Primordial Wave is a great way to get the momentum going. It's a good way to get that Flame Shock up on the target and to get that ability on cooldown. When you use that that ability, oh yeah, I forgot. Old School Boss can't use Primordial Wave. He doesn't have it because it's not on his Covenant. So when you use this, it's a great way to apply Flame Shock for the first time. So you can see here, they both Elemental Blast, Flame Shock goes up, then Fire Ellie is popped, etc. Now, one of the reasons you can see another tip here is that Fire Ellie was popped for Zap Slap before he used Primordial Wave, which applies Flame Shock. This is big. When you use Fire Ellie first, your Flame Shocks that are applied while Fire Ellie are out last like 30 seconds. So because of that, if you look at this top example, Old School Boss, he really should have Flame Shocked after he popped his Fire Ellie. It would have given him a much longer duration, saved him some GCDs of refreshing that Flame Shock, or at least one GCD of refreshing it. Now, you can see that they both use Lava Burst. Lava Burst is cast. Okay, after the Lava Burst, they're using their first Empowered Stormkeeper. Now, as you can see, they both do exactly the same thing. They use it, then they both have enough Maelstrom to use Earthshock. They use Earthshock. That procs the instant cast Lava Burst. They use it. They use their next Lightning Bolt. It's actually very closely aligned. It's almost exactly the same. Then they both use Lava Burst. Then they use a casted Lightning Bolt. Then they both use Elemental Blast. So these are exactly the same abilities that they're using, and it's part of the Rigid Opener, right? And as part of that, they're both getting the value of Elemental Blast. They're both getting the value of Master of the Elements, which is when you hit with that Lava Burst. So they're buffing each of these Lightning Bolts from your Stormkeeper by 20%. It's pretty good. That's great. Now, again, they're buffing casted Lightning Bolts or casted, they could have done it with the casted Elemental Blast, but it probably wasn't off cooldown because it was just coming up. So that's fine, right? They're buffing those casts. That's critical. And you can see even in Zap Slaps, they popped a Bloodlust actually after that opener, which is kind of interesting. I'm just looking. Okay, no potion is seen on my buddy, but down below you can see potion of Spectral is down there. So the other thing, let's look at again. Let's just quickly look at the damage curves. We can look at that through. I minimized it here, so let's look at it again. Let's go back to damage. Let's go ahead and go to the table. You can see the damage spike actually is very similar for the first like 5 seconds, but you can see even right away. Well, I guess, yeah, the first 3 seconds. And then right away, even up to 10 seconds, where we're at in the rotation, it's curious that the Zap Slap is actually significantly higher at 10k DPS, while my buddy is at about 7k DPS. Now, that's kind of interesting, and that really comes down to Primordial Wave. So some stat stuff is there, granted, but if you think about it, this first opener, all those abilities up till about 15 seconds, the curve is similar, but the purple one is just sharper, and that's because he's a Necrolord. That is additional int based on the using Primordial Wave will buff his int, increasing his damage, and that all kind of is multiplicative, right? So that's right here. Activating your Necrolord class ability increases your primary stat by 5% and up to 4 allies, etc. So that's all being shared, but that buff is now ramping his damage up. And so let's go ahead and go back. But that's just an interesting thing. It's clear they're pressing similar buttons, if not the same, for their covenants, given that their covenants are different, but it's actually looking like up to 12 seconds, up to 15 seconds, they press the exact same buttons. And the Necrolord is much higher. Now again, int was different on the int screen, some secondary stats, luck of mastery overloads. There's some things here, the trinket here, for example, but proc of sinful even. I mean, there's a lot of things, but it's just interesting that it could be that different given the covenant change. And let me know what you think down below, but it's something to know. Let's go ahead and go to the next 15 seconds. I'll zoom out let's zoom back in a little bit. We're going to go to the next 15 seconds because what I want to do, we'll go down. We'll just use this timeline. Okay. Let's go down to the next 15 seconds. From 17 seconds on, you can see this is the part of the fight where you're just standing there casting, right? You're just standing there doing your damage. There's a part of the fight coming up where there's going to be movement. This is when the miasma goes out and everyone has to run to the edge of the room. So you can see Lava Burst, Earth Shock, filtering Lava Burst in between the other casts. Lava Burst, Lightning Bolt, and then the Earth Shock, you get an instant Lava Burst, casting Lightning Bolt, Lava Burst, Lightning Bolt, etc. So you can see up above my boy, Old School Bus, a little bit different. Similar, but it looks like he had started chain casting lightning bolts. Now, I don't know why that is, but ideally you'd want to filter in lava bursts if possible. The lightning bolt spam is okay, but generally you don't really want to see that. It looks like maybe even Elemental Blast could have been available. Or another lava burst, hopefully. But really, ideally, you don't want to just chain lightning bolts. You want to be filtering in those lava bursts before, to make sure there's flow going on there. And you also double lava bursting, generally not the best, because you can usually fit in a lightning bolt or an elemental blast, which can be beneficial and increase that damage. So, that's what you want to be doing, especially during just general DPS phases. You don't really want to see this chaining of lightning bolts. So that's a big tip. Now, this is an interesting thing. So looking at about 30 seconds, this is the part of the fight where people are running out to the walls. And this is where we see one of the instances where this is a boss-specific tip. You want to be using or he could have gotten the any debuff that he has to run out. The explosion, or I forget what it's called, not the expunge, the other thing where they target one person and then it drops a line. I'll show it on the screen. But he's using Ghost Wolf, getting a position, standing there, doing nothing, then cast, right? Frankly, you don't want to do that. You probably want to pop, a Spirit Walker's Grace, which this guy will pop eventually, and you want to keep casting, or you want to plant your feet, get to a spot, plant your feet, and keep casting, keeping your damage rolling. You don't want to just stop. Dead time is going to drop that DPS so fast. You don't want to do that. And you can see that that's a big difference here. Now, again, back to general rotation. Again, we've done other Elemental Shaman log reviews, filtering in Lava Burst, Lightning Bolts, making sure the Flame Shock uptime is 100% is key. And you can see that some of that here. Now, what you see is the use of Stormkeeper. Another big opportunity for a tip is using Stormkeeper doesn't mean you have to spend it right away. Right? So in the bottom section, we actually see a Lava Burst go off, which means he has the Master of the Elements buff. He Stormkeepers, Earth Shocks, which actually gives him another Lava Burst, and consumed this buff, but he has a Charged Lightning Bolt. Really, he should Lava Burst, then Lightning Bolt, and then refresh it again, but he doesn't do that. He just does Earth Shock, Lightning Bolt, Lava Burst. He then reapplies Flame Shock by Primordial Wave, uses his second empowered Lightning Bolt. So this could have been optimized a little bit, but it's okay. He uses 2 Lava Bursts in a row, then goes back to Lightning Bolt. In the top section, we see my buddy Stormkeeper. He uses Elemental Blast. Like, okay, he didn't have it charged up by any Master of the Elements, unfortunately. Then he uses Lava Burst, Earth Shock, Lava Burst, Lava Burst. Like, this is a great opportunity where you could have done Stormkeeper, Lava Burst into Elemental Blast, into Earth Shock, into Lava Burst, into one of the Lightning Bolts. Then cast your other Lava Burst into your second buff Lightning Bolt. Oh my god, I'm flipping the words around. But you know what I'm saying? So that's huge. And actually here, it looks like in the top log for my buddy, he doesn't actually get both Lightning Bolts out. It looks like he only gets one from Stormkeeper. And then it looks like he has to Ghost Wolf and run away again. And again, this is a difference in the logs where you're seeing that he does not keep up his uptime. This is where you can see down below. This is probably where you're running to the back of the room while the boss is sucking in, everyone's HP, healing himself based on that a little bit. But in the bottom log, Zap Tap is using Spirit Walker's Grace. He's able to keep on the move and keep casting. Otherwise, you're going to get pulled toward him, right? So he's able to do that and keep casting, keep his rotation going. In this period of time, he gets off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 globals before my buddy gets to cast his first Lava Burst again. So that's key and is why the top log you saw, he literally drops to 0 DPS. Now, frankly, that should only really happen to melee. Melee can hit the boss. If they have ranged abilities, you could still use that. Like I refresh Flame Shock, I use Frost Shock, all that stuff. But it's key to keep the momentum going. So again, in this boss fight, you're going to have to run out, that's when you want to use Spiritwalker's Grace. Save it for those opportunities. In general, reiterating some of the tips, you want to make sure your Stormkeeper, you're utilizing that to the max, making sure that they're buffed with Lava Burst, Master of the Elements. You also want to make sure that you're filtering in Lava Burst into all your spells and all your rotations, because it's critical. Now, again, you can see over here further on, you can see Ghost Wolf. Whenever I see Ghost Wolf, I know casting's going to stop, but I never see that down below. Could be RNG, but it's good to know. Now, it looks like my buddy up here, he goes Ghost Wolf probably to run out of the room, and then you see spamming Frost Shocks. I'm not sure why you did this, maybe because you're on the move, but frankly, you should just keep casting. Again, maybe it's because you were trying to save the raid by jumping into miasma circles, but it's really critical that you keep filtering things going, and you can see, discipline through the use of trinkets and such below. Now, let's go ahead and just go to one more Stormkeeper use. Again, you can see there's definitely a rhythm down here, right? Lava Burst, Earth Shock, Lava Burst, Lightning Bolt, Lava Burst, Lightning Bolt, Earth Shock, Lava Burst. Like, it's a flow. Up here, a little bit more sporadic and less actions per minute. That's something else. I know he said that he had some lag issues, but it's just something to note. Now, let's go ahead. Again, you don't want to see this ever. You want to make sure you're filtering in Lava Burst into everything you do and getting that flow going on. Let's go ahead and go to one more Stormkeeper. Right. Again, similarly up here, again, a lot of gaps, and that means maybe you're not comfortable with the boss fight, but it's really critical that you do keep this is all just kind of dead air, which is not good. You want to keep the momentum going, and maybe it means you're being a little bit too scared. You have to risk it a little bit to keep the momentum going. Now, again, we see Stormkeeper, the bottom parse gets another Stormkeeper off while the movement's happening up here. So you can see he does the same thing. He gets a Lava Burst buff, Lightning Bolt, Lava Burst buff, Lightning Bolt. Then you're back. You dump that, you maximized it, you're good to go. Now, again, in the top log, this is his third Stormkeeper. Stormkeeper is used. He uses Elemental Blast. Lava Burst, great. Lightning Bolt, Lightning Bolt. Again, you don't want to do this. You want to use Lava Burst. You want to use one Lava Burst for one buffed Lightning Bolt. Then you want to do another Lava Burst. Even if you gotta wait, it's okay. Use another Lava Burst, then use the second buffed Lightning Bolt. Huge. You gotta do that. You gotta do that. And again, you can actually see Fire Alley was used here at about 203 seconds, and on the bottom, he might have used it way earlier. He used it actually a full 15 seconds earlier. You got to make sure on cooldown using that Fire Alley, critical for maximizing DPS, especially with Primal Elementalists, okay? So that's pretty much it. Number one, know the boss fight. Number two, filter in those Lava Bursts to get that maximizing that 20% bonus. Make sure you use your cooldowns correctly. Make sure with your Stormkeeper, make sure you maximize your opener with potions, with knowing exactly the buttons to press to maximize that DPS. And otherwise, clearly part of the reason you got more Lava Bursts off down in the bottom, number 3 parse is because of Primordial Wave. Unfortunately, that's a reality. And unfortunately, Chain Harvest is just not doing much damage for the Elemental Shaman. It's a little sad. But it is what it is. We have to deal with it. And, yeah. And the other thing is, make sure you don't have downtime where you're not casting anything. Make sure to use Spiritwalker's Grace to its maximum to get the most value out. So I hope this is helpful. Again, we're not going through every single second of this, but I hope this is helpful for understanding maybe where you could improve and helping my buddy out. I hope, you can take maybe something away from this too. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate it. If you do like this video, if you like this content, hit that sub button, hit that like button, share it with an elemental friend, and we will be back for hopefully another log review. If you like this and you want me to review your logs, hit me up on Discord. The link's below. Happy to go through and try to figure it out and try to give you some tips and tricks. I mean, I'm offering help for free, so, it might as well take it. But with that being said, we'll see you on stream every day, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, over on twitch.tv/tickle this, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care, everybody.